If you're ready to decimate hordes of enemies before they even approach, the Burning Heartseeker Marksman build in Last Epoch is your go-to strategy. This guide will walk you through the leveling of your marksman to level 60, optimizing your skills, passives, and gear for maximum damage and survivability. The Burning Heartseeker Marksman excels at eliminating large groups of enemies from a distance, combining high area effect damage with strong survivability. This build focuses on synergizing skills like Cinder Strike and Heartseeker to maximize fire damage and, of course, crowd control. To begin with, proceed through the starting zones using Flurry and any bow you can pick up along the way until you reach level 4. At this point, you will get Acid Flask. Combo Acid Flask with Flurry and then at level 5 with Puncture. Once you hit level 7, you will then get the first skill that you will start specializing into, which is Cinder Strike. At this point, you can combo Acid Flask with your Cinder Strike for a little bit longer until you get enough passive skill points in your Cinder Strike skill tree. Once you get 10 points into your Rougue passive skill tree, you will then receive Decoy. This will be your second skill that you want to start specializing in. Choose Marksman as your mastery once you get 20 points in that Rougue tree, and then level up and get 15 more points into your Marksman skill tree to get Dark Quiver, which will be your third skill that you will specialize in. Then at level 30 comes Heartseeker, which will be your fourth specialized skill. Here you will shoot a Heartseeker and spam Cinder Strike, renewing the Heartseeker once it reaches its max recurves. During the harder fights, or which you are clearing which bigger groups, you can then shoot up a Dark Quiver, which requires you to run around picking up dark arrows, which in turn increase your Cinder Strike and Heartseeker damage. If you pull too many mobs, you can always pop your Decoy down, which will explode and give you time to clear the masses while it is CCing them into a more concentrated pile. At level 50, you will get your final specialized skill, which will be Shift. Once you have all 5 of your skills on your hotbar, you can follow the same pattern as before, but use Shift during boss fights or big pulls to get your Jade arrows for even more damage. Make sure you specialize the skills in this order to make sure your leveling experience is faster and easier. And if you're enjoying this guide so far, make sure to make my YouTube leveling experience even easier by liking, subscribing, and clicking that notification bell so that I can keep you up to date on all things ARPGs and Last Epoch. At this point, it is important to understand how these skills are used to work together to create big damage. First off, the reason we are using Cinder Strikes is because it costs no mana to shoot. This is tied to the Rougue's passive skill, Sapping Strikes, which gives us mana and health every time we cause damage with a skill that uses no mana. Since Cinder Strikes is an AoE explosion, every mob hit by that skill gives us health and mana back. In addition, the Heartseeker is also a great AoE clearer, but you are limited to only 3 Heartseekers with a 2-second cooldown on each of them. So the combination to shoot the Heartseeker into a crowd and then use Cinder Strike to explode everything works together so that the Heartseeker can seek out other targets. Otherwise, it will just sit and recurve on a single target until it's dead and then move on. Once you get used to that kind of rotation, you can then combine your Dark Quiver by pre-shooting it into the air and adding it to your rotation to make these pulls even faster, while using this Dark Quiver to buff the damage on your Cinder Strikes and your Heartseeker. Looking at how to build each skill is also very important, because for maximum damage potential, we will need to overlap all of our skills to buff them to create a system which stacks damage on top of damage on top of damage. At least at level 60, you should have most of your skills leveled to around 18 if you follow the order that was previously mentioned. To do this, we will start off with Cinder Strikes by maxing out Inferno and Blast Wave, then move to Incinerate and finishing with Searing Blows. This passive setup is meant to create the most fire damage possible to really amp up and help stack elemental damage items we are equipping through the campaign, and it really explodes everything very quickly. As for Decoy, many people do not utilize this skill enough, but once you look at the way it not only CCs and groups enemies up, but also does considerable reflect and explosive damage, it should be used a whole hell of a lot more. You will build embedded spikes to back up Buddy first to get an additional decoy, and then focus on explosive damage by leveling up Boom and Short Fuse, and then Shrouded Core. The shadows will come in handy from Shrouded Core once we put into use the other skills from the Dark Quiver. And speaking of Dark Quiver, it is a complicated skill to build as it meshes well with everything, so we have to be very careful in how we are allocating all of our skill points. I prefer to skill up Dragon Slayer first, as it has a huge upside by allowing you big damage every time you pick up a Dark Arrow with Cinder Strike. I then go to Bleak Arrow for the additional 50% recurve chance. Then go to Arrow of Trickster, and then finish with Umbral Resolution. Now, remember these shadows mentioned before? Now we are not only making shadows every time we pick up an arrow, but we are also making shadows with every decoy. And Umbral Resolution is meant to create more damage by using up those shadows and making your next arrow shot even bigger. As for Heartseeker, we want to focus first on maxing recurves, building Woven Grasps to Nimble Threads, and then Relentless Volley for extra Heartseeker charges. Then build Dragon Fang for max fire / elemental damage. It is important here to note that Molten Arrow Storms convert all physical damage into elemental fire damage, so now we have a solid elemental focus to work with. As for Shift, Velocity reduces the cooldown, and then build into Venom Tipped Arrows for your Jade Arrow extra damage. As for itemization, try to balance your damage with your resistances, and you should definitely make sure that at least your physical resistance is at 75 before you reach the end of the campaign, as the final boss that you must fight does a lot of physical damage. The damage priority goes plus bow fire damage, plus bow physical damage, and plus any other elemental bow damage that you can find. Then percentages of physical or elemental damage, with fire being the highest priority. If you are ever unsure about your choices, just compare the DPS gain or loss that your skills get by switching the items on and looking at your skill tooltip. If damage is higher, then you made the right choice. If it's lower, go back to the old item and try to find something better. And also make sure to focus dexterity, as this will help increase the damage of all of your bow skills. By following this guide, you will master the Burning Heartseeker Marksman build easily by efficiently leveling to 60 and preparing for in-game challenges in Last Epoch. Also, remember, if you like this video, like, subscribe, and click that notification bell so that we can stay connected easier. As always, thanks for joining and have a great day.